Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. WitchLit is brought to you by 1000 Volt Press, a family-owned independent publisher established to produce the books we want to see in the world. All our titles can be purchased directly from 1000voltpress.com or wherever you buy books. If you'd like to support WitchLit, please consider buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/witchlitpodcast. Siri Vincent Plouff has been a practicing witch for nearly 20 years and has been reading tarot and runes professionally for 6. They are in the Vulva Stav program, training with Kari Touring. They are also the brain behind the Radical Heathenry podcast, The Heathen's Journey. Siri has several flagship teaching programs such as the Radical Runes course and Witchcraft Immersion. Radical Runes is a rune class from a queer, chronically ill, anti-racist point of view. Siri is co-author of Lessons from the Empress with Cassandra Snow. Her latest book is Queering the Runes, out November 2024. Siri Vincent Plouff, welcome to WitchLit.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. As a reader, listeners will know that we always chat beforehand, and I was joking with Siri that everything in my office will probably go off because we're a Mac house. Thankfully, that did only happen once. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So it may happen again.
It's so funny, too, hearing you read my bio back. I'm like, oh, I need to update that. Dang it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to do that.
If you want to send an updated one, I can always change it.
That's okay.
Cool. So I loved the book, and I can't wait to talk to you about all things runes. But our first question for everybody, especially in this age of podcasts, which we both do, and social media and short form kind of things, why still write? Why still write books?
Because I like them. I really appreciate them. I also think that in this age of social media, especially social media, but also podcasts, YouTube videos, which I guess are kind of social media, but I digress. There's something really nice about being able to refer to something, to open a book and go to your annotations and go in and do all the things. That is really satisfying. And I know that I know that there's really quality information being shared on podcasts, on social media, Patreon posts, websites, all of these other places, but they feel very ephemeral to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially, so we're recording this well before it comes out. And of course, the big conversation in pretty much anybody who has to use social media for work lately has been oh my God, why is it so awful? I hate it. And the algorithms are changing all over the place. And, we're definitely quite a ways after Elon Musk bought Twitter and summarily tanked that social media platform, which was my absolute favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that's really nice about being able to refer to something and something that is going to be there. I mean, it's also part of why I've been kind of reviving my blog lately.
Mm-hmm.
Where, it's this is interesting information that people can scan. They can skip ahead. They can, refer back to it. And it's more importantly than that, it's on my website, which is not going anywhere unless I want it to go somewhere.
Right.
Which I think is really, nice. And so I think that writing books is always going to be a very important way of recording complex thought and information, particularly if there's a lot of nuance to what you want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in your book, you talk in a couple different spots about how this kind of came out of the class, the Radical Runes class that you teach. And I thought that was really interesting that it's this has been something that's been part of that experience, but how So what was it like to translate that, I guess, into a book that was going to be out for people who weren't in your class necessarily?
Well, the book, it's funny because I feel like the book really feels like it stands on its own now. And one of the things from the bio that I need to update is actually that Radical Runes as a live course is retired.
Oh.
So I am currently in the process of recording Radical Runes as a, I'm not entirely sure which platform I'm going to do it on, but, as like a teachable course essentially, or a Podia or something that you can, go at your own pace with, for a lot of different reasons. But one of those being that I just couldn't keep fitting all of the things into 6 weeks or 6 live classes with, other Q&A sessions and stuff. So I'm expanding the material greatly. But really it's sort of this big amalgamation of things. So like the whole thing started as a column at the Little Red Tarot blog. I don't know if you remember that one.
I'm not familiar, but I'm sure we'll have listeners who are.
Yeah. Beth Maiden, fantastic. Used to run a kind of radical tarot blog. It's actually how Cassandra Snow and I met.
Cool.
Cassandra Snow is the co-author of Lessons from the Empress. And then Beth changed, basically didn't want to continue hosting a community blog. So all of the community writers ended up needing to find new homes for their work. And so I started the Heathen Sturdy podcast. And then from the Heathen Sturdy podcast, I decided I really love teaching. So I started teaching Radical Runes. And so basically this book, in one iteration or another, like writing about, thinking about, sharing information about the runes, I have been doing for about 7 years at this point.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that I've been reading tarot professionally for, I think, almost 8 years now. And then runes, I wasn't as confident. I didn't start doing that right away. But usually like since like 2019-ish is when I started reading runes more publicly.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think it's interesting because you hear a lot of stories about people who just like get a tarot deck and they're going to read professionally. Like it's, next day kind of thing. And there's like almost no way to do that with runes unless you're just like a primo actor.
Yeah, man. I mean, you'd have a much better time just like scrying with like a crystal ball than trying to read runes professionally before you like really know them. And it's a memorization thing, really, like I think that, and I talk about this in the book, like one of the things that I think is kind of freeing about the runes is that they are pictorial, but they're not like they don't have like form, they don't have an image. And you can make the shapes with your body, but it's not immediately apparent like what they are if you're just looking at them.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked what you said in the book about, like the imagery of the tarot. I don't know if you said it exactly this way, but it has so much cultural baggage because it depicts people, what ethnicity are they? What position are their bodies in? How are they represented as masculine or feminine? All of that kind of stuff. And the runes don't really have that. So it's I think a lot easier to walk into without those preconceived things and really get to know them for themselves, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I do definitely think that the runes have the cultural baggage of having been appropriated by white supremacists. And that is very much an appropriation. It is not, their original purpose by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting. There are cultural markers, and I do talk a lot about culture in the book and how culture is an essential part of understanding the runes. But if you're just starting from nothing, they're symbols. And I relate to them a lot more like, relating to a sigil, for example, or something like that, when I'm thinking about magical things. Whereas with with tarot or oracle decks, the image on the card is gorgeous. I mean, I love art, so I think that's why I kind of collect tarot a little bit, is that I just love having these works of art collected in decks around the house. But so they are beautiful, but they also do immediately strike you with like a preconceived notion or something like that you maybe like don't even realize that you're adding on to the art.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, I was just thinking about like one of the things about tarot, especially with newer decks, is that I feel like a lot of artists who are working on tarot decks really are making an effort to make them more inclusive and diverse. And then you still have like kind of hiccups where, yes, there are people in bigger bodies portrayed, but they're sometimes portrayed really negatively.
Yes.
And then you have decks. I had Charles Harrington, on to talk about the vampire tarot deck that he did. And they had like a heavier vampire, but it portrayed very beautifully. And he said that was something that they had actually talked about. He had talked about with the artist. It was like, yes, I want people in different sized bodies, but I don't want them to be like a caricature of that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, yes, this is what we need. And again, that's not as much of an issue with the runes. You have the other issue, as you pointed out. But, and I don't know, I guess just as someone kind of on the edge of kind of Nordic Germanic practice, like I think in some ways, until very recently, it has really made me kind of keep it at arm's length, because it's just difficult to like it. There's one of the things I love about your book is that I know that's not what I'm going to find when I open it. But when you walk into a lot of books about runes, is the main source he who shall not be named, who seems to be, cited in every rune book in the world.
Oh my God. Yes.
So, and I immediately see that and my heart sinks and I'm like, do they know? Are they doing this out of ignorance, or are they doing this because they agree with him? Like, that's always the issue.
Yeah. Do they know? Are they doing this because they agree with him? Are they doing this out of some kind of weird academic misguided, like, oh, well, we must be thorough, therefore we must cite all the sources that are out there, and it's a glaring omission not to cite this one who is unfortunately very prolific. Mm-hmm. Because that's kind of how I think about him. Anybody who knows runes at all probably knows who we're talking about. I don't need to name him if you don't want me to.
I mean, you can. I said it mostly jokingly, but yeah. Oh. I mean, I don't expect anyone to come for us, so I'm not worried about it.
Okay, cool. Yes, it's Edward Torsen. Yeah. I went through a thing where I was like, should I have an Edward Torsen book? Just, like, and read an Edward Torsen book just so that very specifically I can notice when people are like bringing up his work, and kind of where a lot of some of these wackier ideas might be coming from, or that kind of thing. And I couldn't get through it. It's just like, I have way better things to do with my time than read this book, just because, like, I feel like somebody somewhere might have cited him without citing him.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no way to know that, especially in the era of, pagan occult, witchy, heathen publishing, where citations just weren't a thing. There might be a bibliography at the back, but citations weren't really a thing. So you can't know where they're getting their information. I kind of rather think they're pulling it out of their ass than quoting him, but that's just me.
Honestly. Or like maybe some teacher that, they had at one point read him and was like, citing him to them or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it is interesting though that you talk about like this kind of like, especially I think in current publishing, this more academic approach to witchcraft and occult books and, all of that kind of stuff, that there is this stronger culture of citations and all of that kind of stuff. But we're still not really academics, and that, like you said, that academic thoroughness where you have to have an annotated bibliography with everybody who's ever written about this topic on the face of the earth isn't necessary. And we can discard garbage that doesn't work. I mean, that's fine. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is coming from somebody who, like, I did cite explicitly and only academic work, you know, not that I only cited academic works, but that I cited work that is purely academic in nature, along with the other work that I cited. Because I cited a lot of anthropologists who study, runes and stuff like that. Like, that is definitely not intended for the practitioner. I cited Baudrillard, who is a postmodern French philosopher, which is not necessarily light reading. I cite, I cite other, academic works, but my goal with my writing has never been to be in an ivory tower. It is to, maybe learn ideas from the ivory tower. I am a very academic person by nature. I just am very interested in why things are the way they are. What is philosophy? What is history? What are all these things? But I don't think that that's necessarily useful for the modern practitioner. You shouldn't have to wade through that. That's my job as the author, right? To wade through this and kind of distill those ideas and make them make sense as something that is, actually applicable to real life.
Yeah. Well, I do think, there are so many interesting things going on in academia around, like you said, around runes, in anthropology and archaeology and history. And I think, there you can get a master's degree and a doctoral degree in this history of witchcraft if you want, those things all exist and interesting things are coming out of that. But they're generally not writing for practitioners. Some of them are. There are definitely folks in that ivory tower who are spying for the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
But most of them are writing for other academics. But that doesn't mean, like you said, you can definitely glean stuff from it. But nobody wants to wade through that all the time. Sometimes you just want the distillation, right? And that's why people buy your book or other books to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no shame in that, right? For topics that I'm interested in terms of a hobby, for example, I might buy Amanda Buntell's The Age of Magical Overthinking, but I also have absolutely zero interest in reading any scientific studies about cognitive biases. It's something that I'm interested in, but not interested in being an expert in.
Yeah. You're not going to dive into your own dissertation on it.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Who has time to do that? Who has time to do that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah, me neither. It's we got a podcast to make. We don't have time for that. But no, I did appreciate the thoroughness of what you talk about. And I think it's so important to, especially in the face of, like you said, the cultural misappropriation of this imagery and just things from Norse intermittent culture that have been misappropriated. So I think it's good to say, no, there are other ways. There are other places to look, and you don't have to go through that particular door to get there. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So this is your second book, and your first book you co-authored. So how was that experience different for you? What was that like?
They are possibly the most different books, writing experience-wise, as they could have been. So Lessons from the Empress was actually also, and perhaps even more so, written from materials that were taught. It started because Cassandra and I were teaching a summer class on I was doing a series that started in the pandemic, but it was really only a series of 2. So is it truly a series at that point? Of classes called Something in Weird Times. So the first one was Self-Care in Weird Times, and it was taught with Lacey Perpiketke, which is a local witch and owner of the Future Minneapolis, which is a really awesome art witch shop here. And then the second summer of it was creating in weird times, where basically Cassandra and I were like, okay, let's look at the tarot, let's look at all of the suits and like really go into like using the tarot for creativity. And because we are the people that we are, we were writing like 20-page chapters of or slash workbooks for like 1 week's class. And we were looking at all of this material and going like, this is so much.
Mm-hmm.
This is so much material. We have to do something with this. And so Wiser, thankfully, also liked it and got it published. So that was really a whirlwind in a lot of ways, because it was the final draft was submitted the same year that we taught the class for that book. And this book is all me, all my baby. Like I said earlier in the interview, like I've been writing it for something like 7 years. If you think about all of the, things and earlier iterations and things that ultimately went into querying the runes. So it was just a really wildly different process. And I'm really grateful to have had both at this point. Cassandra and I have collaborated a lot. They were not a random choice for me when I was looking at like, who do I want to do the second year of this like class with? Like we had, in many years previously been longtime collaborators. And so it was just a very happy collaboration. And this book really, like I started writing it, I think in a lot of ways out of a distrust of heathen resources. And over the course of writing this book, I have gotten much more involved in heathen community and have figured out how to find people who are not white supremacists and how to trust people and how to open up to people. And, I met my mentor while I was writing this book, and I'm getting much more involved lately with the Fellowship of Fire and Ice, which is a radical leftist heathen group. Well, I say radical, but like radical is truly like going to the root of things. So, right, like we're like, not like crazy radical that I have to, you know what I mean? Not like,
I assume you wouldn't announce that like on a podcast if it was.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Especially not a podcast I've never been on before. Like I would not announce, but yeah, but it's like a lefty heathen organization. And, like I found them while I was writing this book. And yeah, it's been really interesting and beautiful. So it started as a sort of like laboring at home, sharing like my own thoughts about runes and how I can, move forward and write. And, I was basically writing my way through teaching myself the runes when it all started. And now coming up the other side of that, I am so much more confident in learning from other people on runes. I have so many more people that I can recommend to folks who are also interested in learning runes. And yeah, it's been a really beautiful process, but it went from, it's like the class itself that Cassandra and I taught was very collaborative. And then it was just the two of us. And now the book is out in the world. And now it's like Querying the Runes started as just me. And now I've slowly added conspirators.
Yeah, I like that. I like that part. I think that was one of the things that I really gravitated to in the book is the discussion of how important community is in heathenry. And I mean, yes, you can, like almost all practices, do it by yourself, but you're missing a lot, and especially in this case, I think, because it's so culturally attached to the idea of community and what that means. And, like, I don't know. I think especially coming out of COVID, I'm like, oh, I miss this.
Yes. Yeah. It's really interesting too. Like I often sometimes like pinch myself and I'm like, am I really heathen? like, am I heathen enough? And I think this is maybe just part of like, you know, some aspects of past life series stuff coming forward. But I saw someone, and I can't remember who it is now, but I saw someone who posted on Threads, which is Instagram's answer to Twitter.
Twitter clone. I don't know what they call it.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. But somebody posted on there that, and they were like, I'm too witchy for the pagans, but I'm too pagan for the witches.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of feel like I live in that space too. Like, I definitely like feel sometimes like I'm, kind of a weirdo heathen because I, don't do a lot of things that other heathens take for granted as a part of the faith. Like I don't actually celebrate bloats, which are the monthly feast / sacrifice that people do. Like there are a lot of heathen practices that seem to be like pretty core to what heathenry is that I just don't do, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't know, maybe it goes back to that idea that, like everyone assumes anything to do with heathenry or Norse culture has to do with the Vikings. Surprise. That's not true. That was a tiny part, and not everybody was a Viking.
Right?
Yeah. So yeah,
this idea that pretty extensively too.
So yeah, I mean, I think the idea that heathenry would be a monolith isn't true either, right? I mean,
no,
that makes sense to me. So
that's the thing about culture is that it's weird, right? Like, and religion and spirituality are a part of culture, and like, cultures are ever changing, and there are always subcultures within cultures, right. And like, you might have your individual tradition versus like the family tradition versus the like overcultural tradition.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that I am thoroughly enjoying in our current glut of pagany, witchy, occult, I always feel like I have to name all the labels because I don't want to leave anybody out, books, is that because I think so many people with European ancestry are trying to disassociate themselves from this idea of white culture and trying to reconnect with either, cultural practices that their family may have hung on to, or reconnect to ancestral practices, that we're getting so much interesting stuff because it makes it impossible to just smooth it into, oh, this is all Germanic, this is all Italian, this is all whatever. It was like, no, it never worked that way because we weren't monoliths of people. In fact, we were even probably more diverse than we are now because we don't have mass media to kind of smooth the edges off everything, So yeah, I mean, I love that. I love that we're getting that and all of these unique and sometimes incredibly personal practices. So yeah, like down to family traditions and things. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we're in such an interesting time in occult publishing, generally speaking, that I am so excited to see where we go from here.
Which seems even more relevant since you now are starting a bookstore yourself.
Yes, I am. Yes. So my bookstore is Lore Books. It is my pride and joy. I am hoping I would love to have a physical space. And I'm hoping to kind of really make it a center, like a community center for like teaching and learning. And it feels like a really natural next step as an author now too in the space to do this.
Yeah.
And I really want the focus to be books, but we'll see how that pans out as like the physical space begins to take shape. But it's also a space where I can, practice my own magic more professionally too. Like I have a line of my own, ritual oils, ritual baths, and spell kits and all kinds of things. At the time that we are recording this, we're currently on like a summer break from essentially I'm in the process of moving, and I knew that as soon as I packed up all of my apothecary items, somebody would order something and I wouldn't be able to find it, and it would be a disaster.
Yeah.
So I put the shop on a summer break, but when I come back, I'm hoping to come back with some new products, and I'm really excited about that prospect.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I love the idea. I mean, I think, talking about it as a community center, like I feel like there's always been bookstore as community center. Like I think about like even, Treadwells and places like that in London that were kind of these occult centers when there really wasn't anywhere else to go to find out anything. Or like, anarchist bookshops, or, they've always been kind of community centers too. And I love that idea of having to make it a community place. And Lord, do we need all lords, all gods, goddesses, everybody? Do we need some more third space places? Like,
yes,
so
people are hungry for it after the pandemic. And Minneapolis, I don't know how much you know about this, but Minneapolis is actually like a really interesting, Minneapolis, St. Paul, like the Twin Cities area, generally speaking, is a really interesting place in that there is a shocking amount of pagans here. Like people don't necessarily associate like Minneapolis, Minnesota with like a glut of pagans, but really like there are so many of us here. And there are also a lot of explicitly pagan bookstores, not just crystal shops. Like we have plenty of crystal shops as well. And not just like herbal shops, but like actively pagan bookstores. So it kind of felt really like, as I was like deciding that I really wanted to go for lore, I was like, oh, but is that really like, does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
Is that need already fulfilled in the community? And the answer that I kind of came to was no, because every different place kind of has its own vibe, what they specialize in, and that is often the proprietor's like area of expertise. But yeah, so I was like, I think I could still do it. I think there's still space.
No, I think so too. Well, and I think sometimes weirdly in places where there's more of it in general, it's easier to sustain something than if you're the sole outpost. So
yeah, I am hoping, I haven't actually talked to anybody about this yet because I don't have a physical space, but if there are other Twin Cities pagan bookstore owners listening to this podcast episode, like get at me about this. But once I have a physical space, I definitely want to do like a pagan, like an occult shop book crawl.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah. Where we all like
so much fun.
Yeah, do like our own little things, and there can be like a little game, like a scavenger hunt or something, like something to kind of like band us all together, because you don't have to be in competition with all these other people, because, my specialty is folk magic and kind of some of the weirder shit. And also I'm planning on specializing in fiction as well, but like specifically fiction that has specifically fiction in like the genre fiction area. Because, the at least in my life, the amount of pagans and witches and occultists who are interested in genre fiction is not a Venn diagram. That's a circle.
Yes.
They're just all interested in the same things.
Yes.
So I kind of want to sort of blend those two together so that, and like that way, if you bring your non-occult friend with you to the occult bookshop, they have something to look at too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, just having interviewed so many fiction authors who either write about the occult or are themselves practitioners of some sort, like, yeah, like I think that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, myself included. So yeah, no, that's.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's this big dream. It's kind of messy right now, but I'm really excited about it. And I have high hopes.
Yeah, well, me too. And I love that sometimes like the perfect thing arises from primordial goop when it's messy. So
yes, that's a very good way of putting it, because it feels messy right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just, I always think of it as like things are kind of like what is the word? My brain is not working today. Things just have to kind of coalesce and come together. And sometimes it takes a while. And sometimes that one piece is out there floating in the ether and it'll get there eventually. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wish good things for that. And clearly I need to get myself to Minneapolis at some point. So
yes. Paganicon is a really good time every year. It's a little bit of a smaller conference as far as pagan conferences go. Yeah, as far as I understand it, it's a little bit of one of the smaller ones, but
yeah.
I'll find out more later because I'm going on the road very shortly.
For this book.
Yeah, so
nice.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I know that Paganicon is kind of Llewellyn's home conference too, since they're there. And so I know they have a lot of big presence with their authors as well. So I had intended to go this year and then we all got COVID right before. And I was like, I don't want to have just gotten over COVID and go expose myself to maybe getting COVID again. So I didn't go. But
that makes sense,
year.
though.
Maybe next year.
That is a good move.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to say, oh, I have no concerns about that. But I'm not in a position where that's something I can just be nonchalant about. So.
Yep.
And I hate it.
Yeah. The pandemic is definitely still happening. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I totally feel for it and understand people who are like, I just have to get back to my life and get on with it. And great for them. I hope it doesn't bite them in the ass. Our family has already been bitten in the ass and we have a long COVID person in our house. Oh, no. So, we're just super careful still. And, occasionally get weird looks when I go in the grocery store with my mask on, but I'm like, hey, that's where we are. So yeah, it's just one of those things. But I do miss the community that I feel like COVID busted apart. And I also moved cross country during the pandemic, which didn't help that situation. So that
would be very disorienting.
Yeah. So I think, I feel like,
yeah.
Well, and I just think about in the current climate of chaos, I don't know what else to call it. I know a lot of people call it tower time, but I have mixed feelings about that. I think community is the thing that will save us all, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so it feels weird to still be kind of in limbo. So I think that's why I was so drawn to that in your book too. Just like that idea of like how important community can be. So.
Yeah. And I think it's especially something that, queer communities have been adapting to for a really long time. So, I write a lot about it in Queering the Runes, because queer people have been adapting to needing to make do and needing to keep resources in the community for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, actually, my partner works at a tax firm that is, like a normal tax firm, but it's a gay tax firm because it was created in the 80s specifically to help long-term partnered queer couples file their taxes before it was legal.
Nice.
To be married. And so it was about kind of building up financial stability and wealth and stuff like that in the community. So, that's just one example of queer people needing to adapt to and create our own community in a lot of ways. And I think that in terms of my friends who are people of color, also kind of talk about that in terms of POC communities needing to have each other's backs in a very specific way that me just coming from white, like a white family, we didn't have to think in that way.
Yeah.
And community wasn't critical in the same ways. I think community is critical for everyone, but when you are brought together through marginalized identity, I think that it is extra important.
Yeah. Well, I think, to be in a community where you feel like you don't have to hide a major portion of yourself to belong, that's huge. Because, finding community in some ways is quite easy if you're willing to stuff that stuff down. Like if you want to join a church or whatever, you can do that. But you're not, if you can't live authentically, then the communities, I think, always going to be hollow, and you're always going to wonder if they really knew me, would they still help me? So that makes sense to me.
I am so sorry for all of the feline drama that is happening.
It's quite amusing. I'm sorry that people listening can't see it. There's like a whole cat tableau going on behind Siri right now. So... Cat drama is always, I don't know. It's so funny to me how many people I've interviewed on the show who have cats. Like it is kind of a stereotype, but it's a stereotype with some basis in reality.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like there's just something very like occult about owning a cat, right? You know, like cats are not necessarily like the run to greet you at the door, tail wagging, like social pet that a dog is. Like cats are like, I'm going to curl up with my book on the cat on my lap, and I'm going to like be an introvert for a while.
Yes. While my cat destroys something quietly somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. Often.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a house full of cats, and there is never no drama. There's always cat drama. Always. Like, oh, who puked on this? That's my favorite drama. Game.
High drama, in fact.
Yeah. So now, as we were talking, dear listener, Siri's book is not out. I very luckily got to read it early, proof. But now that like the big stuff is done, I assume you probably may have one more round of like galleys or something, but like, how does it feel to be done?
I literally just turned in the final page review yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very fresh. I am very much looking forward to promotion season for the book, just because I'm really excited to see it out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my long I almost said my long ingested child. No, my long when you're pregnant, it's like
gestated?
Yes, my long gestated child is being birthed into the world, to put it in the grossest terms possible.
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited to have it in other people's hands. You also caught me right before I'm going to a bunch of different conferences for it. So I'm going to be teaching my Queering the Runes workshop at the Salem Witch Fest July event, Magic in the Margins, this Saturday. I'll be at Mystic South next week. And then I'm going to the in-person Salem Witchcraft Festival, not to teach, but to hobnob.
Yeah.
Just put it that way.
I will be online watching people hobnob in person. I'm a little sad that I'll be online, but
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand though. I do. I just so happened to have a good friend reach out to me. I was gonna skip it, and then I was getting a bunch of FOMO, and then a good friend reached out to me, and he said that he was going and didn't have anybody to room with, and I was like, well, I guess my decision is made.
Yeah, then your decision's made for you. Yeah.
And he's also very cautious and careful and cognizant of COVID too, so it feels like a safe, like a safe room.
Well, good
to be rooming with, rather than
I'm excited to see how they handle it being hybrid. I feel like they've done such a great job with the online conference. I'm really curious to see how they make that work. But I have every confidence in them that they can make it work. So,
yeah. Jackie and Matthew are a really good team. So I have confidence.
I've been thoroughly impressed every year that I've attended. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, cool. Well, I feel like you and I could probably find things to talk about for the next 2 days, but I'm sure that would be awkward for people listening to 48-hour podcast. So
can you imagine?
No, I mean, what is it? The guy who does like the really long history ones. I can't remember, but I can't remember his name because my brain's not working today, but it's Dan something, but he does these hardcore history podcast.
Oh, okay.
And like some of the episodes are like 6 hours long. And I know that you can break it up and listen to it. But like when I go to listen to a podcast, it's usually in a finite space of time. And I see that and I'm just like, oh, I can't do that.
So. That's even longer than Chris Brennan's The Astrology Podcast.
It's so long. I have listened to some of their episodes, but I have to do it like over 2 or 3 settings, which sometimes doesn't make things click with the next session I listen. But
wow, yeah.
Yeah, that's long. Woo. So, in the interest of time, I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug things that will happen after this comes out, since you kind of talked about what you were doing before it comes out. So, perfect segue. Talk about what's coming after. And like I said, this will air like around the 20th of November. And then we'll do our game of chance. So,
yes. So, okay. I already mentioned that I'm transitioning Radical Runes into a self-paced class. That is the next biggest thing. And that is a super labor of love. Absolutely adore it. I am doing a full lecture for each rune. So 24 lectures, probably not 24 hours of lectures, but 24 lectures, as well as a lot of, kind of additional materials and stuff like that. And the portal for that one opens in January.
Cool.
And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to open the portal on the class several times a year. So you have a finite time to sign up for it. And then you have the luxury of taking the course over time. But the reason I'm doing that is so that there can still be a little bit of a cohort feeling. So whoever signs up for it, during like the different portal openings, there will be Q&A sessions, opportunities to book reading with me for, less money, or to book a one-on-one with me, if you want, as a part of that cohort, so that I could still kind of keep some of the benefits of having a live class with the primary benefits of an online pre-recorded class being more time. So there's more material that I can cover. And I don't have to teach it live every single time.
Yeah.
So that is exciting. And like I said, that's coming in January. I figured I'd give people time to read the book. The book will be required reading for the class.
Smart.
And yeah, so that's kind of the next big thing. And then I also am plotting a new podcast. So as you had mentioned in your intro to the class, or the podcast episode, wow. I'm also the host of the Heathen's Journey podcast, which I've been kind of feeling like weird about for a while now. Like I kind of want to I have a lot of aspects of my practice that are not explicitly heathen that I want to get into. And so I want a podcast by a name that is a little more freeing.
That makes sense.
Not as narrow. So it will have probably launched by the time this comes out. But I am plotting a podcast called Chaos and Cunning.
Nice. I like it. I'm in.
Yes.
I'm in.
Yes. So it kind of brings together my two major loves of chaos magic and folk magic. Folk magic, cunning folk. You get the gist.
Yeah.
And it's going to have a lot of, shorter episodes where I just talk about a topic. Maybe it's something that people are interested in or curious about. But I also do plan on having some interviews. I'm going to, in speaking in terms with the podcast theme, I'm going to keep it a little chaotic, and I'm not going to structure myself too much and see what happens with it.
I like it.
Yeah. So find that wherever you listen to podcasts. Update on when that is released, TBD.
We can put notes in the show notes. We'll have links and stuff so people can find it.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I will keep the Heathen. I'm not retiring the Heathen Journey podcast. I'm just going to make that kind of like the Heathen wing of the podcast. So anytime I have a podcast episode on Chaos and Cunning where I'm either interviewing somebody who is writing in the heathen space or talking specifically and explicitly about heathen Nordic topics, I will cross-post it to the Heathen's Journey podcast. So if that's like the only thing that you ever want to hear from me about,
you have an option.
You have an option. You can just keep listening to that podcast. Yeah, those are the two main things. I'm sure that I will have more updates on Lore Books, the bookstore. I can say that I am building up a library of one-off lectures for the Lore Academy. And they're $30 to just download the recording.
Nice.
And if you are on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Siri Vincent Plouff, you get access to attend a version of the lecture live for $15 a month.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. So you essentially get 50% off the Academy if you are a patron at the $15 a month level and up. That does not include all of the lectures in, the self-contained courses like the Radical Runes course, but it is the standalone lectures. Like, I'll probably do one on sigilcraft. There'll be more like topics and learning in witchcraft than a cohesive, multi-hour long course.
Great. Well, awesome. And like I said, we'll put all that in the show notes so folks can find that. And we'll do our game of chance. So I don't know if you had a chance to listen to an episode of the podcast, but this is my opportunity to ask especially nosy Scorpio questions, like about topics we're not supposed to talk about. So I'm going to roll a die, and depending on what I roll, you'll get a question about death, sex, religion, politics, or money. And if I roll a 6, you get to pick which one you want. And you can skip if you don't want to do that topic. So
perfect.
So 6, you get to pick.
Sex.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's querying stuff, right? We have to talk about sex.
So this is something. So I was thinking about, like, sometimes I have a hard time writing questions for people. Not always, but like today my brain's not working. So I had a hard time. And so I was thinking about, like, I don't associate what little I know, honestly, about trolldom with like sex magic. But I was like, if someone will know, Siri will know. So I want to ask you, what's the situation there with sex magic and trolldom?
Oh my God. Okay. So sex magic is in everything, truly. Like, I think that it's just a thing that people are into. You could also talk about love magic as being a part of sex magic, not always. And this is probably my favorite little trolldom, like, sex magic thing, without going like too deep into it. In the film Midsommar, there is this spell where the woman, the red-haired woman, if you've seen the film, you know who I'm talking about. She's trying to woo one of the visitors into having sex with her, and she either makes him a treat with her pubic hair in it or her menstrual blood or both. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head right now. That is an actual spell in trolldom.
That goes beyond trolldom. There's a lot of traditions that have something similar to that. Like, my husband was telling me, like, this very Caribbean, I don't know if it's specific to Trinidad, but he's from Trinidad. And like where you make sweat rice, where you kind of get your juice in the rice that you're serving with dinner to keep your man in place. So
interesting. Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely like not just in trolldom, but that is kind of like my fun pop culture answer to the question.
No, I love that. And I love that it made it into like a folk horror movie too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. If there's one thing to be said about Ari Aster, it is that he does his research. So
yeah. It's so funny to me, like, how cinematography wise, that movie is just stunning.
Oh, yes. I love it so much.
Just like has like all of the, like, I think of all like PBS shows of my childhood about Sweden that I would watch obsessively because I was like trying to figure out what it meant to like have all these ancestors and stuff. And it just reminds me so much of like Scandinavian summer. It just has that like glow to it.
It really does. Yes. Truly.
Yeah. I would like to experience that for myself at some point. I have not yet gotten to go to Scandinavia. I've been to Germany, but I've not been to Scandinavia anywhere yet. So on my list.
I love it. I'm hoping to go back soon, but we'll see.
Does your family still have family in Norway?
We do. None that I'm in touch with.
Mm.
And so I got the incredible opportunity when I was in graduate school to study in Norway for a summer.
Oh, awesome.
And that was actually right at the beginning of my work with runes too. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool. It was very affirming. That trip was kind of like rewrote the course of my life in a very serious way, I think. Mm-hmm. Because my ancestors were just like, hi, we're doing this.
Yeah.
So, and I was in graduate school for a completely different thing. I was studying energy policy in Norway, of all things. Not of all things. Like Norway is kind of known for like
I was gonna say their
energy and climate policy and stuff.
Yeah,
but like
exactly.
You know, like it's very different from what I do now. I'm in no way in the field.
Yeah. We all find our bliss eventually, right? I mean, one hopes. I shouldn't say that we all do, because there are people who don't get to live their bliss, but sometimes you find your bliss in circuitous ways.
Yes.
And it took you to Norway, which had its own meaning. So
yes. And sometimes it's better for that.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Well, I hope you continue to find your bliss in lots of ways. Especially, in the chaos of the world right now, we have to hang on to joy. I think I keep reminding myself joy is praxis. So
yes, it is. It's very important. And it's one of the reasons why I find Wunyo to be such an important rune for us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wunyo is, for those who are not, who don't know very much about runes, Wunyo looks like a pointy P, like a pointy letter P, kind of. But it is the rune of joy and kind of abandon and mutual reciprocity. It shares sort of reciprocal meanings with Gifu, which is the rune of the gift.
Which is an X for people who don't know.
Yes.
This one looks like an X. So
yeah. So I think it's a really important rune. I think that we can learn a lot from it. And I think too that it's hard to let yourself feel joy sometimes.
Yep. So we have to take it where we can find it. And I think that's important. In queer communities, in occult practitioner communities, just in your life, find some joy, because you're going to need to hang on to that.
Yes. Let yourself be very silly, at least once a day.
If you have cats, it'll be easy, I promise.
Oh my God. The saga continues with the whole, now my partner is wrestling with them. Like, I can hear outside of this. It's just, there's so much happening.
Cats. Oh, well, Siri, thank you so much for your time and for doing this and for a lovely book and all of that. And let's talk again. Let's continue the conversation at some point. So
yes, absolutely. Well, I will definitely continue writing. So for future books.
Awesome. WitchLit is a production of 1000 Volt Press and is edited by Julian Rashke. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shanekar. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram or Threads at witchlitpod. Please help other witches find us by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening to and reading WitchLit.